Hello there, people of the internet. This video is going to upset people because, well, it kind of goes against what the main narrative of 556 is. And the main narrative of 556 is that if you want the most effectiveness out of your cartridge, you gotta run it through a 20-inch barrel like what I have right here on my M16 build. This is a KP15 lower and a PSA upper, but it's got a aftermarket barrel inside of it. I got the hiccups, guys. I'm sorry about that. Aftermarket barrel inside of it that we will go ahead and touch on here in a second. But I want to talk to you guys about the 16-inch AR barrel and how the 16-inch AR barrel is, by a huge margin, the most common rifle length barrel that you're going to find in the United States, just because it is the shortest legal barrel length that we can get without having to worry about either SBRing a rifle and getting it registered or having to worry about like not putting a real stock on the thing. So your 16-inch barrel length, that's as small as you can get without resorting to essentially classifying your AR as a pistol. And there's a bunch of legalities and gray areas and whatnot that goes into that I really don't want to deal with, and a lot of other people don't want to deal with, which is why 16-inch ARs are so absolutely dominant out there on the market. Now, if you go and watch chronographs of the 16-inch barrel versus a 20-inch barrel, you'll notice that the numbers coming out of those rifles are extraordinarily similar. And a lot of people don't like that. So the 16-inch barrel, if you're rocking, say, 55 grain projectiles, like what I got right here, and we're talking 5.56, not 223, which has a lot more discrepancies based off of like brand and barrel lengths that they're tested in and things like that. So if you're rocking actual 5.56, like say Lake City 5.56, to where you're going to get the best performance out of that rifle, you're going to be seeing rounds flying out of a 16-inch barrel at about 3,000 feet per second. It's going to be between 3,000 and 3,100 feet per second. There's a lot of variables and discrepancies whenever it comes to cartridges, because we have like our average number that will run, and then there'll be a bunch of numbers just surrounding that. Like, it's not going to be exactly 3,000 feet per second every single rifle round shot. It's going to be between like 3,000 and 3,100 feet per second, somewhere in that ballpark, with your actual 5.56 ammunition, which is about what you would come to expect. Now, your 16-inch barrel rocking, we're just going to go ahead and go on the low end here and say 3,000 feet per second. That's a pretty good, adequate rifle. Out to like 400 yards, you're still maintaining some pretty gosh darn good ballistics with that 55 grain full metal jacket. And the terminal capabilities of that, whenever it smacks onto a soft target, is exceptionally good. If you were to take that same 55 grain bullet and throw it into a 20-inch barrel and look at the chronographs of those 20-inch barrels, you're only gaining about 150 feet per second, which is not a lot, like at all. 150 feet per second really does not add very much in terms of the capabilities of the firearm itself. Now, that 55 grain bullet, like I said, out to 3, maybe even 400 yards, which is what most of us would ever need to engage anything at. If you're going to be touching out beyond that, you're definitely in some sort of specialist role or specialist situation where you might want to use a larger caliber, heavier bullet. But that 16-inch barrel, that extra 150 feet per second that you get to moving it to a 20-inch barrel, for all practical purposes and all practical reasons that you would ever need to shoot something with a 5.56 round, it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to, like, that extra 150 feet per second isn't going to make or break anything. The one caveat that I'm going to give is that there are certain kinds of armor that you can just very barely punch through with that 55 grain bullet from like basically point blank range from a full length 20-inch barrel. But the likelihood of you being set up in a situation that not only requires that, but you are set up to where you can actively achieve something like that is exceptionally low. And us as U.S. civilians, like, that is exceedingly unlikely, the fact that we would ever need to do anything that would fall into that sort of capability. So that extra 150 feet per second really is not going to matter much. Now, where things really start to matter in terms of what your barrel is your twist rate. The velocity itself is so minimal in terms of the differences between a 16-inch and a 20-inch, to the point where, like I said, all practical purposes applied, whatever practical purpose it is you need to use a 5.56 round for, it's not going to make any difference. But what will make a dramatic difference is the twist rate of your rifle. This right here is a Radical Firearms AR with a 1 in 7 twist barrel. And most of us are going to be rocking a 55 grain or a 62 grain bullet, just because by a huge margin, that is what has flooded the market for 5.56. And 55 and 62 grain from a 1 in 7 twist just sucks. And it sucks because that 1 in 7 twist is spinning the bullet way faster than what the 5.56 was originally intended to spin at. And that very fast spinning bullet essentially drills its way through whatever target it is that you shoot. What gives a 5.56 its really good effective, like its terminal effectiveness, is whenever it smacks a target, it's supposed to tumble and yaw and break apart in fragments, or at least the lead core stuff is, whenever it smacks onto that target. And if it just has a drilling effect, like say you would normally get from a 1 in 7 twist barrel, then you don't get that tumbling and yawing. You get essentially just an ice pick wound through your target, and you don't transfer a lot of energy onto that target. And that's one of the big misconceptions as to why that happens. It has nothing to do with the barrel length, realistically. It definitely has a lot more to do with the twist rate. And I know it has nothing to do with the barrel length, because if you watch chronograph testing of green tips, like actual 5.56 green tips, not any commercial stuff that just claim themselves to be green tips but actually aren't. If you run actual 5.56 green tip through a 16-inch barrel and through a 20-inch barrel, they're both going to go about 3,000 feet per second. Just with the way that the pressure curve actually runs, with the way that the powder burns inside of the cartridge, you don't gain any additional velocity from that extra 4 inches. The big issue with these cartridges absolutely is that very fast twist rate. It's just not designed around that. Whenever these green tips were being designed, they were actually designed around a 1 in 10 twist. And that 1 in 10 twist doesn't overstabilize the bullets to the point to where once these green tips smack onto something, they immediately tumble. The thing is, the United States ended up adopting a 1 in 7 twist because they wanted to be able to stabilize a variety of different bullets and bullet weights, which is why they ended up going with that. So if you do decide to go ahead and rock a 16-inch barrel, which is probably going to be the best barrel length for a vast majority of us, I would recommend getting yourself a 1 in 9 twist barrel. With the 1 in 9 twist, 55 grain bullets and 62 grain bullets are both going to stabilize exceptionally well. And if you're just the average person like I am, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are, you're probably just going to be firing 55 and 62 grain bullets through your AR. If you want to go with something heavier, like say 77 grain, the 1 in 9 twist will in fact stabilize that 77 grain bullet. And the people who tell you that it won't are people who haven't actually gone out to test to see if it will. Because those of us that have gone out and tested it have seen that the 1 in 9 twist will in fact stabilize a 77 grain bullet. So you still have that option if you decide to go ahead and run that. But the 1 in 9 twist is much better to get those bullets, those 55 and 62 grain bullets, to start tumbling at a far sooner point, or a far, like they tumble far sooner than that of your 1 in 7 twist, simply because they're not spinning as fast, they're not as stabilized, so whenever they smack onto a target, they don't drill through the target, they start tumbling and yawing. Now, it's not quite as effective as, say, a 55 grain would be through a 1 in 12 twist barrel, and we've all seen the tests on that, I'm sure. The watermelon test by Military Arms Channel is probably the most famous. But the 55 grain through something like that is just absolutely wholeheartedly and completely devastating. It has a lot more to do with the twist rate than it does the actual barrel length, though, because at the distances that most of us would ever be shooting these rifles at, just that extra 150 feet per second really does not matter. like at all if we're talking about 55 grain bullets. And it really, really does not matter if we're talking about green tips because they go at pretty much the same velocity. If there is a difference, it is exceptionally minor. As a matter of fact, I have this right here. This is a Ruger Mini 14, and it has a 16-inch barrel on it, although it doesn't look like it because it's a pretty long gun. It has a 16-inch barrel on it, but this right here is a 1982 production. And back then, Ruger was making these firearms with a 1 in 10 twist barrel on it. And that 1 in 10 twist will, in fact, stabilize both 55 and 62 grain bullets. I've made videos on this Ruger Mini 14 doing exactly that. But whenever this smacks onto soft targets, like soft, not necessarily gelatin, but gelatinous targets, I've used this for hog hunting and pig hunting and going after all sorts of stuff to exceedingly good results. Whenever it smacks onto soft things, it just immediately starts to tumble. And dude, it will leave like a grapefruit-sized hole in whatever it is that you shoot at. Just because as soon as it smacks, it really does start to immediately tumble. I would say the 1 in 10 twist is absolutely the way to go if you're just going to be rocking 55 and 62 grain bullets. The 1 in 12 would be a good way to go, like which is what should be in this AR barrel, this M16 barrel here. I actually have a 1 in 10 twist, but the 1 in 12 twist, if you're using 55 grains, is a really, really good way to go. The issue is it won't stabilize 62 grains, which is why I have a 1 in 10 twist inside this thing. This is a really, really good setup for a rifle because it's going to be extraordinarily effective on target, and I have the benefits of that slightly longer barrel giving me slightly more velocity. However, like I said, for most of us in most practical applications, that velocity difference really is not going to matter. What really matters is the twist rate of your rifle. So, I think I've said my piece here. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. If you have a 16-inch barrel and you're concerned about it because it's not a 20-inch barrel, I really would not be concerned because the difference is wholeheartedly negligible. Just bear in mind that if you have a 1 in 7 twist barrel, you might want to run some heavier bullets inside of it because your 55 and 62 grains are basically just going to drill right through whatever it is that you're shooting at. And that's one of the reasons why 5.56 has such a bad reputation. Go out and get yourself a 1 in 9 twist barrel. Highly recommend it because that's your best option for your very common twist rate barrel that will still be quite effective with those 55 and 62 grain bullets. So, thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode. There goes the hiccup. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.